I've always known myself to be someone who overthinks. I wasn't always this way though. I think it really started around my mid teenage years, probably when I was around 15 or 16. And I can't remember exactly what triggered it, but the way it plays out for me is that I tend to make up these scenarios in my head. It's almost like a defense mechanism, trying to predict future reactions to things that could happen, just in case they actually do. Now, don't give me too much credit for being some sort of great planner. No. It might seem like I'm always prepared for whatever comes my way, but it's not quite that simple. It's more about making up different ways I could respond, multiple angles I could take if something happens. The truth is, most of the time, those things I'm overthinking never even happen. You might start preparing responses, what you're going to say if someone said something bad about you, or even something nice. It's like rehearsing for an interview that will probably never take place. And let me tell you, it's draining. But recently, I've started asking myself, how productive is it? Am I actually getting anywhere by overthinking? Have any of those scenarios I have mentally prepared for ever helped me? Sure, there has been the occasional moment where I've been ready to respond to a compliment or a gift, but the truth is, I never really had a solid reason why I do it. I mean, I get why I do it, but does it get me anywhere? From where I stand now, I don't think it's as helpful as I once thought. And that brings me to today's topic, overthinking. Why do we do it? Can we ever stop it? Personally, I haven't been able to stop mine. So, if you're looking for a quick fix, I'm afraid I don't have one. But I'm open to exploring how I've tried to combat it in the past, how I deal with it now, and maybe how I think I can do better moving forward. This is Sometimes Curious, Often Confused. I'm Richard Okongwu. If you have ever felt a little out of place, you're in the right spot. Here, we explore the questions most people overlook without pretending to have all the answers. The awkward, the oddly relatable, the ones that make you wonder, am I the only one thinking about this? If you are curious enough to keep asking, you are exactly where you need to be. Well, I don't know about you, but for me, overthinking often shows up as overpreparing. I find myself running these elaborate scenarios in my head, thinking about what I would say if someone complimented me, or even worse, tells me something they don't like about me. I replay these conversations in my mind over and over and over again, crafting every possible response. And honestly, it's exhausting. The thing is, most of these situations never come up, but I still play out these imaginary interactions, trying to make meaning of things that probably don't even require it. Sometimes I find myself looking for hidden messages in what people say, trying to decode their body language, wondering what it really means. It's normal to want to read into things, right? But I tend to take it a bit too far. For example, I would think the way they looked at me, maybe they were offended, or maybe they were actually happy or impressed. But here's the thing, it's rarely ever a positive thought. Instead of assuming the best, I actually find myself assuming the worst. Maybe I'm just trying to protect myself, or perhaps it's a way of staying in control, preparing for an uncontrollable situation. I used to think this kind of preparation was smart, like it was helping me stay ahead of the game. But these days, I'm not so sure. I find myself asking, is this really productive? Am I getting ready for something that will never happen? Or am I just spiraling in my own head? Am I living too much in my head? Because one thing I have learned from both reading and talking to other people is that overthinking isn't as nearly productive as we think it is. It's not really thinking, it's more like worrying. It circles around the same thoughts and doesn't lead to anything good. Overthinking also exaggerates things, even making them seem worse than they really are. And before you know it, you start becoming biased. You stop noticing the small details that could make things clearer. Instead, you focus only on the thoughts that feed this obsession, for the lack of better term. And that's the bias. Without even realizing it, you start seeing things through the lens of your overthinking, almost like it's pulling the string of your perception. Over time, I've realized that this habit isn't as productive as I once thought. These imaginary scenarios, they drain me more than anything. I find myself wondering, have any of these make believe conversations ever actually helped me? The answer? Not really. They leave me exhausted and a little farther from finding any sense of peace. Overthinking also bleeds into relationships. You start focusing on things you shouldn't, overanalyzing situations, imagining things that may never happen. And then, without meaning to, you start seeing even the kindest people around you as threats. What if they turn against me in the future? And it's really positive. It's about anticipating conflict, not connection. Maybe that's why overthinking always seems to center around negative outcomes. It's not about being prepared for challenges, it's about expecting them, even when there is no sign they are coming. At its worst, overthinking takes over your daily life. It doesn't just have you preparing, it has you reacting to situations that haven't even happened yet. You're not just preparing for possible events, you are reacting to events you have made up. And it sounds crazy, right? Reacting to things that haven't happened. But it's like an addiction. Just like an addiction, it starts to affect how you view the world, how you engage with others. You begin creating meaning where there is none, imagining offenses where none was intended. And instead of addressing things in the moment, you replay them in your head over and over. And with each replay, the situation grows bigger, more dramatic. A simple missed greeting turns into evidence of someone trying to avoid you. This overthinking habit didn't appear overnight for me. It started around when I was 15 or 16, as I mentioned. But was it really a response to something specific or just a part of growing up? I guess it doesn't matter. What matters is that I still deal with it and I'm trying to figure out how to keep it under control. I've heard from others who have gone through something similar, and it seems like general consensus is that you can never really stop it completely. You can't eliminate it, but you can manage it, keep it from spiraling out of control. And I will share what works for me. But first, let's talk about how it happens. If you have experienced it, you might want to skip this part. I'm just kidding. Don't skip it. Don't skip it. Okay, fine. Sorry, don't skip it. So, how does it happen every time? You drift into this alternate universe where everything is replayed, endless thinking, rethinking, overanalyzing, and it never feels like it's your choice. If it were, you wouldn't be here complaining about it, right? It's almost like it's happening to you. It's outside your control. It can feel like a maze. Each turn you take makes it harder to escape. It often shows up when we are vulnerable, during big decisions or moments of change. Social situations only add fuel to the fire. There's always that fear of missteps, misunderstandings, or judgments. And it's strange how some contexts seem to make everything feel more high stake. People often try to cope with overthinking through mindfulness or distraction. But let's be honest, mindfulness sounds great in theory, but it's rarely the instant fix it's made out to be. And distractions, sure, scrolling through social media or zoning out for a bit can give you some temporary relief, but it's just delaying the inevitable. The thoughts always come back, louder and even more tangled than it was before. Ironically, overthinking is often seen as a sign of caution or intelligence. but it rarely leads to clarity. If anything, it clouds your decision making. There is this thin line between thorough thoughts and analysis paralysis. I've been on both sides, where overthinking helps me foresee problems, and other times when it makes the simplest decisions feel impossible. It's a balancing act, and finding that balance is easier said than done. So, can we truly stop overthinking? I'm not so sure. It feels more realistic to aim for managing it rather than trying to eliminate it altogether. Because honestly, trying to stop it feels just like another form of overthinking. Maybe the goal isn't to get rid of it, but to figure out how to coexist with it without letting it take over. So, how do we all handle overthinking? A few hours after I came up with today's topic, I came across a video on Instagram. The person being interviewed was asked what you wouldn't believe about her, and she said she's such an overthinker. So I went to the comment section because, I love reading comments, just like a lot of people. I mean, don't we all love reading comments? Please, I'm curious. So, don't we all love reading comments? Does anyone not love reading comments? Because I really do. So I read a comment from someone talking about how they have been handling overthinking, and it's almost aligned. Actually, it's exactly the same way I handle mine. I ask myself, do I have control over this? I mean, it's my way of separating what I can control from what I can't. Whenever I catch myself spiraling into overthinking, I pause and I ask myself that question. And if the answer is no, I redirect my focus. Hold on, I know it's not easy, but I try. If it's something I once controlled but can't anymore, I ask myself, what can I do about this? If there is nothing, I let it go. But if there is something I can do, I make a plan for how I'm going to address it. And then I try to step away from that thought for a while. The reason why I need to step away from that thought, at least in my case, is that if I don't, I start spiraling again, worrying about how I'm going to control it in the future. Does that make sense? So I'm worrying about something that has already passed, and then I'm about to start worrying about how I'm going to handle it in the future. It doesn't really change much, right? So the best thing I found for myself is to just get away from the thoughts for a while. I think of happy moments. I try to be grateful for other things, and I focus on something else. If I was overthinking about my relationship with someone, for instance, I might think about something completely different. I'll try to watch a comedy video or do something offline, something that doesn't have to do with human interaction at the moment. I know I'll definitely come back to it because guess what? I'm an overthinker. I'm certainly going to come back to it, but for now, I just want to give myself a break. And sometimes when I use this method, I find myself being biased towards people who are worried. Or at least, I think I'm biased sometimes because I tend to be this someone who is a bit too solution oriented. Whenever I see someone worrying, I'm like, quit worrying and focus on how to fix it if you can. Which sometimes I think is unfair to them. People should be allowed to, the opportunity to think and go through some stages naturally. But the reason why I tend to do this is because I know what it feels like to be in that place. And I'm always grateful when someone brings me out of that spiral when I'm stuck. So maybe I'm not being unfair to them. I'm just trying to help. Another way I try to handle overthinking is through journaling. For some people, what works for them is writing. It works so well for them. But for me, I don't really like writing my thoughts down because of some reasons. I'm aware that some other people don't like writing things down either. So there is a tradition I found that works for me. Instead of writing with a pen, you can try recording yourself talking. You can just try to speak. Say it out. Don't keep it all in your head. Say it out. And don't worry if you're not comfortable with your voice. You don't have to listen to it. You can delete it a few minutes after you record it, or maybe a few hours later. If you're worried that someone is going to come across it, instead of worrying about that all over again, you can just delete it after a few minutes. Knowing that you can delete it right away often makes you speak more freely. So that's something I would recommend because it works for me. And again, don't worry if you're not comfortable with your voice. You can always delete it. You don't have to listen to it. Or you can try writing it down, just like normal people do. And just in case you haven't figured it out yet, I know I overuse the term normal people. In case you haven't heard me use it, just expect it more in the future. When I say it, I don't mean that some people are normal and other people are abnormal. It's nothing like that. It's just a term I use for things that a lot of people seem to do. I hope that makes sense. Why did I feel the need to explain that? Was I worried you misunderstand? Wow, look at me. I'm doing exactly what I'm trying to fix. Just a quick tip if you are going to be writing it down, please don't look for the best words. Hmm? You don't have to have the best vocabulary to be able to write down your thoughts. That was something that I found difficult when I tried to journal things down. Please, I don't want you to fall into that trap. Hmm? If you want to write things down, use simple terms, whatever that comes to your mind. Write as though no one is going to read it. If you are still afraid that people are going to come across it, maybe make use of a smartphone app. I think there are a couple of apps that support lock. You understand? You can actually put a password, and I would recommend you use a PIN, maybe 4 digit PIN that is not connected to any other thing. If you're someone like me that doesn't want people to read your thoughts, you understand? Don't worry, you're not different. You're not that different. We all do it. There are a lot of people that don't want other people to know what they are thinking. They don't want people to know what they are experiencing at that moment. You know, not because we are not going to tell them later, but for now we just want to process it by ourselves. You get? Don't look for the best terms. Don't look for the best words. Don't look for the best phrases. Don't pay attention to grammatical error. Just write. Just write as you feel it. You understand? Just write. And that brings me to the third one, or rather the fourth one. I don't know, which is talking to someone. At times I've been worried about things, and the moment I said it out to someone, I realized how small of an issue it actually is. Because I know that sometimes we live in our head a little too much, and we tend to be unfair to ourselves by circling the same thoughts, which makes the issue exaggerated in the end. But having a conversation with someone about the same topic might make you see it from a different perspective. And you don't necessarily need to oversimplify it for this to happen. It kind of happens naturally. The more I talk about it, the more comfortable I feel around the topic, the faster I might see a solution. You might actually come across a solution on how to handle it, or at least clarity, which is enough for you to get out of your head. Because most of the things are either worries about how to handle things or worries due to lack of clarity. And I try to make sure that the person I'm discussing this thing with is someone I trust or someone I can have a real conversation with. I have such friends that I have very weird conversations with. And hopefully, I'm going to make an episode in the future about these kinds of people because they are angels. Those who have them should be grateful to have them, and those who don't should. They are the kind of people that you can have weird conversations with out of nowhere. They are your tribe, your homies, your guys. Yes, hopefully, I'll talk about them in a future episode because I think they deserve it. For now, let's try and focus on something that is a little more under our control, which is the act of trusting. And not just trusting anyone, trusting ourselves. I trust myself. I trust that I've been able to handle similar conflicts when they have happened in the past. And therefore, I tell myself I'm going to be able to handle them again. It's kind of a reassurance. You have done it before. You can do it again. It might seem small, but because it is internalized, it feels more effective than hearing it from someone else. With that being said, sometimes you need to hear it from someone else, especially when you are afraid you might be lying to yourself. And let's be honest, we have all been there. There is this moment when you doubt your own thoughts, wondering if they are just comforting lies. So, yes, hearing it from someone else can help. But please, I beg you, don't crave it. Don't sit around waiting for it. Reassurance doesn't just drop out of nowhere. Hmm? It comes from those real conversations. Maybe they'll offer it, maybe they won't. But whatever happens, promise me you won't overthink why it didn't come. Please promise me that. And you can absolutely try it with your friends. For example, you might do an open mic style activity. I recently did one with my friends, inspired by a podcast I listened to. In the podcast, the two hosts who are friends, they talked about what they admired about each other. I'm not sure if they got to the part where they shared what they disliked about each other. But when I did it with my friends, we went a bit deeper. We shared what we admired about each other and also pointed out areas where we thought the other person could improve. And honestly, it's one of the best interactions I've ever had. It felt meaningful and real. So if you're thinking about it, you might want to be the one to initiate it. Since you're initiating, you will likely have enough time to prepare. And here is a tip. Please don't over prepare. You don't need to overthink the responses or the questions you are going to ask. Go prepared, but still try to leave room for spontaneity, a bit of raw natural interaction. Okay. When you ask your friends the question, try to encourage them to respond sooner rather than later. Not in a pressuring way, of course. It's not like you're in a romantic movie where someone needs to decide whether they are going to date you or not in a few days. You might actually find that some of the things that you feel deeply insecure about in your own life are actually the very things that people think you are doing well in. It's something a lot of people have said, and even researchers have noted that we tend to be our harshest critics. Why? Because we see the behind the scenes of our life. And when it comes to overthinking interactions with people, because let's be honest, most of this overthinking stuff, it tends to revolve around relationship. It's often an issue of being unfair to ourselves. And sure, overthinking can happen in more personal areas too. But when it involves others, we criticize ourselves even more. We think, maybe I offended them. But have you ever considered maybe they are not offended at all? Maybe it doesn't mean anything to them. And if it did, they will likely tell you. And here is the thing, asking them directly might not even be the best remedy. You might unintentionally put the thoughts in their head, making it seem like a bigger issue than it actually is. Anyway, that's it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. I look forward to recording more episodes like this. Not necessarily on overthinking, but on similar topics, everyday stuff. And here is a little bit of inside information. So, while I was trying to record this episode, I overthought a lot of things. What if this presentation doesn't come out well? I mean, so I don't even know. Should I be calling it a presentation? This is supposed to be me just speaking into the void. And maybe me calling it a presentation is just a way of me over preparing for it. I know I want to do more relatable topics, the things I can relate to, which I know other people are likely struggling with. Even though I don't have remedy. I mean, this podcast wasn't built on finding remedies or giving people solutions to their problem. It's called Sometimes Curious, Often Confused for a reason. And I look forward to recording more episodes like this. Speaking of relatable, if you have more episode ideas or the kind of topics you want me to explore, the things that you can relate to, which you think I can also relate to, or maybe I don't have to relate to it, maybe I've seen people that have been there, you know, just share your thoughts with me via Instagram. Send it as a DM. The username is at SCOC pod on Instagram. Or you can shoot me an email at dearscoc@gmail.com. The both are going to be in the description. The way Instagram is built, you have to follow before you send a DM. So this is my way of telling you to follow on Instagram and try to interact with the posts that I do upload there. I do appreciate you guys. I appreciate the support so far. And I would also appreciate if you could maybe take a screenshot of this episode and send it to a friend of yours. You can't say for sure. It might actually help someone to stop overthinking whether someone has them in their thoughts. Maybe you screenshotting this episode and forwarding it to them, or maybe copying the episode link and sending it to them might make them know that you have them in your thoughts, that you know that they are passing through this right now. Maybe that's all you need to do for them to feel seen. Because let's be honest, that's what we want most of the time. We want some form of clarity, we want some form of assurance, and we are good to go whenever we get any of these things. So that's all I have for you right now. And don't forget to send me your suggestions. I really appreciate them. Thank you so much. And until next week, stay curious.